Ooh, baby, live with Lance, our very first one. And welcome in, guys. This is the Setup Man channel. If this is your first time, well, what a great one to come in with for the first time. We got Lance Brozdowski here. I've got beer in hand in Hawaii. Lance is in the freezing cold in Chicago. So, you know, we're going to rub it in.
Lance, I would do the same. How you doing, man?
Well, hey, next week you get to be in Nashville, so it won't be as bad, right?
I wish it was Nashville. It's Dallas.
Sorry, not Nashville. Dallas. Last year was Nashville. Nashville
was great, but I've heard the venue, this hotel for Dallas, is smaller. So I think that's good and bad. Good because you may run into more people, have more like face-to-face interaction with cool people, but bad because I imagine this is going to prevent anyone from coming out of their hotel rooms on the front office side because they're just going to be like, I do not want to run into certain people, so I'm just going to hang out here. So I don't know. I'm excited to report from it, though.
Kind of like what I heard about like all the Dodgers front office last year, just like they never came out of their hotel room.
I think that's the case for most. I'd be curious to see like the key card data on entry for team and give me it all ranked. Who came out of their office, their hotel room the most, you know?
Well, hey guys, let's go ahead and give you a proper introduction here, and then we are going to get started. You know, some things on the agenda today. We're going to talk about the Matthew Boyd signing, but there's some even more pressing things that happened today. Before we do, make sure that you comment, that you like, that you subscribe, that you do all the things. The first 25 minutes of this, Lance and I are going to go back and forth. I'm first of all, name's Kyle Stanley. We got Lance Brozdowski here from Marquee. I'm the emotional fan. Lance is the level-headed reporter, expert from Marquee. And I'm also going to drop his YouTube channel. Lance, I'm going to give you a second here in just a sec to kind of plug your YouTube channel. I just put it in the comments, guys. Lance is a baseball genius, and especially from a metric side, he really knows this game extremely well. And I came to Lance with the idea of like, hey, what if we just went live and we gave the audience an opportunity to interact with us, but especially ask you, Lance, the questions. And so the first 25 minutes, you and I are going to go back and forth on some things. But then the last 20 minutes, we're going to give you guys a chance to ask your questions. So make sure you're posting your questions in the comments as we're going. And we'll go ahead and get to, we've only got 20 minutes. We can't answer all of them, but we'll do our best. But we will be doing this every week. So make sure that you're tuning in every week to be able to get to hear from Lance. Now, Lance, really quickly, just before we get into everything, do you want to plug your YouTube channel really quick? I did put it in the comments, but what can people get out of your YouTube channel?
Yeah, my YouTube channel is National Baseball. It's a view at mostly pitchers, but I'll hit some hitting things as well. Pun intended there. Trying to just still advance topics down is always, I think, been my cadence on like, excuse me, any kind of content I make. It's like, can we take a really complex topic and communicate it to the average fan? So it's a lot of that. It's a lot of, honestly, me taking information from other sources and people and trying to teach it back to myself by making a video. You know, like if I learn something about a particular shape, the death ball that we talked about in the past, Ben Brown throws it, etc. That pitch, like, why is that pitch relevant? Like, let me talk to people, and then let me push it back out to the masses, and hopefully they understand it. That's really what my channel is at the end of the day. And I feel like I've got some good traction. You have as well. So it's been fun to grow together.
You're coming up on 10K subscribers.
That's close. Big time, bro. Just get me there. Yeah. That's hyped. Yeah. It's awesome.
Well, hey, awesome. We're going to get into it. Obviously, as I already mentioned, first of all, welcome if you're joining in. Make sure you like the video. We're going to talk about some of the news that came out today. I guess we can't call it news. We're going to call it rumors before we call it news. We're going to talk about Matthew Boyd. But before we do, like, the golden at bat, what in the hell is Rob Manfred trying to do here? If you don't know, guys, basically what Rob Manfred is basically trying to get into this great game of baseball is something that will destroy it, in my opinion. And it is in the biggest situations of the game, you can basically put any of your best bats. You get to name whichever batter that is the golden at bat, and they get to go into the biggest situation of the game as like a wild card. I kind of picture it as like the celebrity shot in beer pong. Like, yeah, I don't want to take the shot, so you take it. That's not baseball, in my opinion, Lance. Like, and just so like we all can throw this out there, I loved the pitch clock from a pace perspective. I think there's a lot of people who don't like it from an injuries perspective. I love eliminating the shift. I love a lot of the things that he's done, but I think this would be a huge mistake.
Agreed. Yeah, I think it's a simple one to me. It's just like it's good to have these conversations. I think as like a league office, throwing around these ideas and having like ideation sessions is good. Like I almost enjoy to some extent that a crazy idea like this made it out of whatever. I mean, why Manfred decided to say this one, I have no idea. I imagine there might have been other ones that were A, more realistic, and B, just better for the game as a whole. My main hesitation is like I agree that we need to get more offense in the game, et cetera. And that's basically what every rule is pushing towards. But every single May, we run into the situation where guys are getting injured on the pitching side. And I think for the most part, it almost seems to me like the league generally thinks that teams have to solve this. Whereas I view it in the opposite direction. I think the league has to create incentives for the team to solve this, you know? And by doing that, I mean adding things in like the double hook, creating some incentive if a guy goes 18 outs specifically. You
Yeah.
could, if you want a golden rule, tie the golden rule to getting a pitcher 21 outs, you know? Like, dude, I don't know, figure out a number that's high. You get a guy through 8 innings, you then get to hit whoever you want in the ninth, you know? Like, it'd be a quirky rule, it'd be odd, but I think it would achieve more from forcing teams to re-incentivize depth, which I do think is a pretty important part of baseball from just having good starting pitchers on the mound. And listen, the Tigers were a fun team last year, but the reality is they're not a very watchable team unless Schoolball's on the mound. It's just,
Yeah.
you know, you're not going to convince me like Tyler Holton is going to be a guy I'm going to pop on MLB TV when you have a bunch of other pitchers going in the league that I'm far more interested in. And maybe I don't watch how the average fan watches, but I just think we got to push this towards like fixing the injury problem with pitchers.
Well, I think you could argue the same thing you said about the Tigers was the same thing for the Cubs with Shota Imanaga. For a lot of fans, at least, that's how a lot of us feel based on the fact that there's really not a star on the team. And if that was a rule that came into play, like, okay, with the Dodgers, it's always going to be Shohei or Mookie, maybe sometimes Freddie. With the Cubs, like every single day would be a new golden bat because like there is no real star on the team. Maybe the most consistent would be Seiya or Bellinger if Bellinger can bounce back. But I always liked your idea of tying the depth, like you were talking about, going 6-7 innings to the DH. I thought that was a really good
that's
rule.
an easy one, right? Yeah, I like that a lot. I think that's
like something. Yeah, a lot more achievable than saying, "Oh, let's throw this new random thing that feels like Nintendo 64 into the game of baseball."
It's true. I think for the most part, the reason like the pitch clock and pitchers not hitting work is because they happen very quickly and like you almost forget about them. You know, they get implemented into the game, excuse me, so easily that you almost forget it's a rule. You know, like shifting was a big topic and then it happened and I don't even think about it anymore. And that's a good rule that improves the game. You kind of forget about it. And I feel like something like this in terms of the double hook would basically go unnoticed for the most part and it would have a positive impact on the game.
Yeah. Well, hey, let's get into a couple things here. And before we do, I also want to make sure we don't forget to let everyone know that we are going to be going live with you from the winter meetings next week. So make sure you guys check your calendars. We're going to go ahead and, the winter meetings, what is it, 4 days long? Is that right?
It's about 3. It's Monday through Wednesday, and then Thursday is the getaway day, so nothing really happens.
So we'll figure out which day that's going to be, but make sure you guys are looking out for that. We always are announcing that on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, all the places. So really tough for you to miss it. The news that came out today is twofold, and there is one, which should be no surprise to anyone. The Cubs and the Mariners are talking about a trade with Nico Horner, which is, I felt like ever since July of 24, we've been talking about that. And then something I thought that was just like perfect timing for you, because you and I were texting about it months ago of like Garrett Crochet. Why are the Cubs not in on Garrett Crochet? And here we are from John Morosi. The reports are that the Reds and the Cubs are viable candidates for Garrett Crochet. So I just want to know your initial thoughts on both of these, Crochet and then, of course, the Mariners and Nico Horner.
Can I flip it back to you? I'm curious on the Mariners side. Cubs fans, like, who do you think they want from that rotation? The Mariners.
I don't know I know the Mariners have a legit rotation, but I'm not going to sit here and tell you that like, oh yeah, I know everything about Brian Wu and I know everything about Logan Gilbert. You know a lot more about that stuff. I know that like Gilbert and Kirby are probably not realistic unless you include like a PCA in that as well, which is just not going to happen for the Cubs, right? So I would imagine it would be more like, I mean, is Wu an opportunity there to you?
I think so. I think that's where I'm going here. Is like
Yeah.
I agree. I think there's only probably a couple untouchables on this team. It's probably PCA, Imanaga, Steele, Swanson, and I don't think anyone else is untouchable. In this particular moment, in this exact moment for the Cubs, that's what I would say. I don't know if you agree there. Do you agree? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, aside from the way that you pronounce Imanaga, that's the only thing I don't agree with.
Sorry. Why do I always mix that up? That's totally my bad. I've probably done this on air too, and I need to be called out more
I'm
on it.
giving you crap, brother. I'm giving you crap.
Man,
I have moments like that all the time.
I'm a bad pronunciator. I don't even know if that's a word, but
You're amazing and everything else. You're allowed to have some moments.
but
No,
that's the untouchables, right?
yeah, for sure.
So then
I mean,
I would be willing to package, I think, a good amount for like a Woo. The problem is like Woo had some elbow issues. Bryce Miller is probably the guy I really want to target because he's under
yeah,
control and he's really good. I think he has high IQ from like a development standpoint. He's made a bazillion changes to his mix in the last like 2 years. Kind of a dark horse out of nowhere. Double A jumped up to the majors. I would pay more for him than I would for Woo. My concern here, and this is something I've talked to other organizations about, or some people in other orgs. I don't know if tweeted or anything, but my understanding is the price on those guys is insane. This is why
yeah,
nothing's getting done. And this leads to my larger point of this part of the year where we get all like these rumors and so and so talk to so and so always makes me like I just kind of cringe. I struggle with it because I know all that stuff gets really great engagement and creates good discussion like we're having here, and I think that's important. But at the end of the day, like I think there's like every conversation is happening within an organization. It's just a matter of like what I guess gets out that's relevant. It's like, yeah, this was very obvious, and I know we have like another credited source now that said it from the Seattle side as opposed to the other one, I think, which came from the Cubs, perhaps, whatever. But I just like I'm not surprised. Like someone report that they probably had a discussion. They probably called the Blue Jays about Vlad, even though they didn't talk to Boris about Soto. I imagine they had an internal discussion about like, hey, do we want to pay this guy? And it was probably a very quick no, and then they moved on. And you can report that as like we had a discussion about Juan. Cubs had a discussion about Juan Soto. Is it incorrect? Probably not. You don't think this entire offseason they talked one time about Juan Soto? Of course they did. It
yeah.
just doesn't get out. So it's like one of those things like I just feel like I could sit here, create a burner account that fabricates all these. And most of them would be like generally true. And I just like struggle with that. I struggle with this time of the year a lot where it's like I'm not gonna tweet out that I know the price tag on the Mariners pitchers
Yeah.
is insane because everybody knows they're insane. They're cost controlled starting pitchers. Matt Boyd just got like $15 million AAV for this. To pitch, he's like,
Right.
I like Matt Boyd. Matt Boyd hasn't thrown more than 90 innings in 4 years, 5 years.
Right.
It's like, of course, the price on Bryce Miller is going to be insane. Come on, this gets me riled up. I don't know why.
I can see it. I can see it. We're gonna have to tame you. We got to get a beer in you too, brother. No, I'm just kidding. I would say, to your point, every single trade rumor that has happened in the last 2 years, can you name one that actually came to fruition? Like,
You know what the funny one that did is like, yeah,
Glass now is
right.
supposed to be a Cub, right?
Yep.
Who else off the top of my head? Vlad, Bo Bichette, all these Shane Bieber, Clase, all these guys were in trade talks, quote unquote, with the Cubs. And then it's like, okay, Michael Busch and Yancy Almonte come over. There was no reports of that. There was no reports of Isak Paredes and Christopher Morel. There was no reports of the Eli Morgan trade. There's nothing like that. But those are the ones that happen. So that's why I'm just like, I'm holding out, and I think we have to hold out as well. And we'll get into this in a second with the Matthew Boyd thing. But I do believe there is a bigger trade behind the scenes that's going to happen. That's not going to be quote unquote leaked before it happens. So for that reason, I think that Matt Shaw is going to be your opening day second baseman only because Nico is injured. And I think Nico is going to come back in. And then I also think that Garrett Crochet will be on some other team besides a Chicago team to start the season.
Yeah, I think that lines up. That lines up with my thinking as well. And like Crochet I've always said makes a ton of sense. It's not really again a novel thing. I've just like said it multiple times, and I feel like everyone kind of forgot about that this offseason until right now. I feel like from the jump they always made a lot of sense. Like I kind of think there's only like 3 teams that make sense for Crochet, and they're the 3 teams with the highest surplus of position playing prospects. It's the Cubs, probably the Red Sox, and the Orioles. That's kind of it to me. The Phillies rumors are cool, but like if you're the White Sox taking Bone back and Justin Crawford for Crochet, like if that happens, like I would be stunned that no other team beat that. Unless the internals that the White Sox have on Bone are just that good, but no way. Like the Cubs could beat that in a second, in my opinion, and not even take a hit.
I didn't understand why the Cubs weren't even like considered an option for the White Sox for Crochet until right now, because they've done 4 trades in the last 6-7 years, and they have all the position players. Like, there's no way that I just did a video with Rachel Folden. Those 7 top position hitting prospects, there's no way that those are all going to be on the major league roster. It's just not going to happen. It's
impossible. Agreed. Yeah. It's a matter of who you trade. I honestly feel like Jed's tenure is going to be defined by like who he trades and who he keeps, and we're not probably going to know the result of that for 4 to 5 years. But that's the reality of it. Like, is he keep them all, and then maybe 2 of them pop and he made the right call? Like, maybe he keeps them all and 4 of them pop and he made the right call. There's also a chance that 2 of them pop, he trades one and they keep one. Like, is that a success or a failure? Like, I don't know. Like, it's a great question to consider. Like, what conversion of these top prospects they have in the top 100 is a success, is like a quote unquote success. Like, if you just get Matt Shaw out of it and everyone else kind of peters out, is that good? Like, I wouldn't think so. But right now, he's kind of only got a fits on the team from my perspective. Like, I don't know where you're playing Casey and getting him at bats. I don't know where you're playing Alcantara. He's up there because he has option years, like, or his option years, are running out relative to Casey. So you kind of got to figure out what you're doing with him, like, now, and I just don't know where he plays. So,
and the only way I think that Owen Casey does have runway is if Cody Bellinger gets traded, and then us as Cubs fans, like, we want to have our cake and eat it too, right? So when Cody Bellinger's on the team, it's like, oh, he's weighing down the payroll. And then when Cody Bellinger gets traded, it's like, oh, we're going to rely on Owen Casey. Like, well, what do we want to do? Do we want to go spend a bunch of money on Anthony Santander? I personally don't think that is the solution either, because he's not a defender, and he had one really good season. And the way that
low OBP too, it's all slug. Yeah. I mean,
exactly.
Council's going to want an OBP guy. I think that's like, I agree with you on Santander.
Yeah. Well, just a quick reset here. We got a ton of people in the room, 160 right now in the room. Sweet. So go ahead and like the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. And we're going to transition over to Matthew Boyd in a second. But there is one comment here that it was just the perfect timing for me to tease something. So You Are the Creator said, sign Trevor Bauer. Believe it or not, guys, believe it or not, I had a conversation with a really close friend of Trevor Bauer, and I'm going to be releasing that conversation on Monday. I'm not going to say who it is. You will see. And he talked about why the Cubs should absolutely sign Trevor Bauer. So I'll be honest, he changed my mind. He changed my mind.
I was going to change my mind on that. Sorry.
I want you to watch that episode. I want you to watch that episode, and then I want you to comment and let me know if your mind has changed or not. Okay, Lance?
Oh, boy. Okay.
And Mark says, why not? Oops, there we go. Why not right here? And then he says, I love Trevor, and why not? So there's a lot of reasons why not if you just look at the media, but you guys need to look at that, share that video once I send it out on Monday. Let's transition here. Loving all the comments too, guys. Keep them coming. We're going to get to the Q&A here in just a few minutes. Let's break down the Matthew Boyd signing. There's been a lot of breaking down about it, so we don't have to spend a ton of time on this because I know a lot of people have a lot of questions. But what I will say, just to kind of get this thing started off, I don't dislike the move. I dislike the money. But also, when you look at the market, the day before, Frankie Montas got 2 for 34. I don't think he deserves that. A few days before that, Kikuchi got 3 for 63. He was good for the Astros the second half of the season, but I don't think he deserves that either. So it's like money's just getting kind of out of hand at this point. And so 2 for 29, while I don't like it, especially based on where the Cubs payroll is at, and it's weird depending on whether you look at Fangraphs or Spotrac, which literally has a $20 million discrepancy. Very strange to me. No matter what, it still puts them in a situation of like, well, then a trade has to happen because there's not a whole lot of money left to go get a guy. Not an impact guy, at least. So what were your thoughts just overall on the trade, or on the signing?
Yeah, I mean, I generally like Boyd. I think again, like, it's always hard to gauge dollar value relative to player in given markets. Like we look at these things very over the last 6 years, these pitchers have gotten this AAV, and it's like, it's so hard when you then see like this individual market has caused inflation, I would say, a little bit more rapidly than you would expect on the pitching side. So it's like, is it perhaps too much money relative to prior years? Yeah, but you also, like, each year is so different that I don't necessarily think it's like great to just look back and be like, well, so-and-so got X amount of dollars, 15 million, 15 years, $50 million a couple years ago, and he was much better than Boyd, had better track record, et cetera. And it's like, I don't know, like this market is weird. And if like you're trying to make your team better next year, like your window to do that is right now. So how much do you really want to mortgage the future, especially in a basically a contract year for Jed? You know, that's a wrinkle here that I find fascinating. I like Boyd. I think he's a good pitcher. You know, this gets in like the Montas angle I agree with, although I think the hardest thing for organizations to do most of the time is to look at like halves and sections of seasons and project those over full seasons. You know, a lot of the time on the data side, it's just the way to approach it is just to not split seasons. It's more predictive just to look at the whole than it is to look at either half on average. But if you can ID for me a change a guy made in the second half, you as an organization have to probably push that scale a little bit on the probability side, not just take the aggregate, maybe go 60 to the second half and 40% to the first half. And that's, I think, maybe what's happening with Montas, where I kind of think he was, I won't say mismanaged in Cincy, but they did some weird things with his usage. They didn't change certain things that I thought were very obvious low-hanging fruit. And then he goes to Milwaukee and they immediately do them. And it's like, yeah, like that's kind of the pitcher that I think he is. I think he's the Milwaukee guy, barring injury, et cetera. You know, like he went to a sinker, he just played around the split. Cutter got better, et cetera. So with Boyd, it's the same thing. It's like, okay, he's off internal brace Tommy John, from my understanding. So we don't have full data on how internal brace holds up over the long term and bounce back and timelines, et cetera. But you could probably assume his elbow will be healthy for 3 to 4 years, and you got him for 3, you know? So it's like, he's been good. It's low velo. It's all angles. The stuff's not great, and the pure results aren't good from like a K minus walk and ERA standpoint. But projections still slot him in as like an above average pitcher, because on a per inning basis over these chunks of innings he's had, especially in the last 100 innings or so he's thrown, he's been pretty solid. So I like it. I think I like it in concert with other moves. If this is the only pitching move, then I think Cubs fans have all the right to be up in arms. But it's a tough one for me to analyze within the moment, because I just think there's more that will happen. And I think you mentioned that Sahadev Sharma said he thought this might be the last move. I don't know if I read that correctly. Is that what you told me?
Yeah. Northside Territory on their podcast, basically Shahadev said, I don't see, based on what he's been talking to a lot of the Cubs insiders about, is that they're not aggressively going after more starting pitching, which was shocking for me to hear, because
that's great. So, I mean, that's,
and that leads you to believe that this is the only starting pitching guy. So it's like, really, that's our guy?
My concern with that is that when you look at like a team that's very model driven, like the Cubs are, especially on like the draft side, but also just the general construction of roster side, my concern is that you're already projected to win the division, I think, in markets from what I've seen on DraftKings, et cetera, which I think is a relatively good baseline. You know, and I would imagine a lot of the times those things line up with what internals the organization has. You know, like public markets, you can get reasonable money down on futures odds. It's just no one's gonna put down that much money and then wait, 9 months for that to cash out. So that's why they're looser with those individual bets. But I do think those odds a lot of the time reflect reality. So I would imagine to some extent that lines up with whatever the Cubs have internally. My concern is that you don't add another pitcher, you just add Boyd. And you're basically saying to yourselves, we're already projected to win the division. Why would we make this team even better? And this goes back to like
we didn't win the division
thing.
We didn't win the division.
Exactly. This is the thing. Because I hate the idea that like we're trying to build 90-win teams. Like, I don't think I've ever said this. I hate that quote. And like I've never got a chance to talk to counsel about it, but it doesn't make any sense to me. 2 years ago, Jerry DiPoto said we need to win 54, trying to win 54% of the games. What's 54% of 162? It's like 86 or 87, right?
It's not.
It's like the same thing. It's fundamentally the same thing. Yeah. It's like if you're trying, like you should not be trying to build a 90-win team. No team in baseball should be trying to build a 90-win team if their goal is to win. It's different if you're trying to win efficiently, which then brings in the monetary side.
Not high enough. Is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Okay.
Because if you look at a range of outcomes off 90 wins, there's a lot of years where you win 78. And that's what we had last year, basically.
I think I get where you're coming from, but also in this division and in this day and age and how many teams make the playoffs, I do think 90 wins gets you where you want to go. But to your point, the Dodgers aren't saying that, and they won the World Series.
Exactly. That's my point.
The Yankees are in the World Series. They didn't say we need to build a 90-win team. They're saying we want to build a 100-win team, right? So I'm with you on that. Let me dial it back in on Matthew Boyd for a second, because
sorry. We got
you're good. You're good. I love the conversation so far. The one thing that I want to focus on. So guys, if you haven't looked at Matthew Boyd, and what I'm taking here is just from Baseball Reference, very easy, free website for you. Matthew Boyd's last let's just call it legitimately good season, was 2019. He was a 3.8 WAR player, according to Baseball Reference, and 185 innings pitched. He had a very good season, 32 starts.
Yeah, really
That
good.
is the last time that this guy has had over 15 starts in one season. That's my issue with this signing. 2020, we'll kick that out, right? Because that doesn't really count. 2021, 78 innings. 2022, 13 innings. 2023, 71 innings. 2024, 39 and 2/3 innings. And I know he had a great postseason, Lance, but I don't think that a guy should be getting paid based on the postseason. So my issue here is twofold. Number one is the ceiling, if he's healthy, is solid, right? In all those years that I just mentioned, there was only one season that he didn't have a good ERA. And this last year, most recent in 2024, he had a 2.72 ERA. So you go out there, you throw over 100 innings. Honestly, I'd want to see over 150 innings for a salary like that. I'm happy, right? And if he does that, that's a steal. That's a major steal, and based on what you're seeing from what the market is at right now. But then the second part that I have an issue with is that the argument here from a lot of people is, oh, the Cubs have depth in starting pitching. And my thing on that, Lance, is like, yeah, we've said that though the last couple of years, and quantity is not depth. Quality is depth, right? And so if you look at it right now, you have Shota, you have Steele, you have Tyone, you have Boyd, which, by the way, 3 of those 4 are lefties. And then you have, most likely at this point, if the season started tomorrow, Javier Assad. But if any of those guys go down, then you have Wicks, you have Cade Horton and Ben Brown, who are likely going to be bullpen guys. And Horton will likely not start the season with the team. Then you have this project potentially in Nate Pearson that everyone keeps talking about. He could be a starter. And then you have Hayden Wesneski and Caleb Killian. And I don't know if I'm missing anyone there. I don't think I am, but that's not
Brandon Birdsell. If you really want to stretch it, maybe that's AAA pitcher.
Yeah, for sure. Back to back. Oh, actually, sorry. Moises was back to back players of the year. He was the pitcher of the year in the minor
pitcher of the
leagues.
year this year, yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of quantity, but I don't know any quality of that. And what happens is when a guy goes down, last year we saw it. Hayden Wesneski came up, 3 starts. We're like, oh my gosh, this is the guy that we saw in 2022. And then he kind of fell back. And then it was like, okay, go back to the bullpen. And then you saw these ups and downs from Javier Assad. And then you saw a bunch of injuries from Jordan Wicks. And then you saw Caleb Killian, all these injuries. I don't see this as depth. I see this as like, yeah, there's a lot of names on a list, but that doesn't get you wins. That's where I stand on that.
Yeah, I mean, to our point on the golden rule stuff, like I do think a lot of teams from the sharper side are starting to approach it such that they disagree with you. You know what I mean? Like we talked about the Tigers. I was talking about them earlier on this live, where it's like, yeah, they're not a fun team to watch unless school is on the mound, but they won a lot of games because they were able to like prove that, you know, quantity at some baseline can be good. You know what I mean? It's like if you have enough average guys, then like you run into the situation where like some of those guys will end up above average, and then you have 3 pitchers that are above average. So I think I agree with you generally, but I do think like a lot of teams are angling more towards this idea that we can probably win through quantity if we're a good pitching development org. And that's probably what the Cubs bet is, you know? Because like I do think they're good. I mean, you give me like an over-under of like 100, we'll say 99.5 innings for Matthew Boyd next season. What are you taking? The over or the under? Even money, we'll say.
100 and how many?
Just 100 flat, over under. I'll take over.
I'm gonna take over. Just
where would it be too much for you?
110?
110, 120? Is that where we go under?
I would like to see around 130 plus.
But what do you think? Like if you actually had to like handicap it, you know what I mean?
I mean, that's
like if I give you even odds at 120, you'd take the under there? You'd be like, I think it's better. More than likely, he's less than 120 by the end of the year.
I think this is just as risky as asking if Tyler Glasnow is going to go over 120 innings. You know, like it's
it's a great point. It's a great point.
It's not likely to me. I don't think it's likely.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. And I mean, like, I'm comfortable projecting him for like 110. Fangraphs has him right now at like 133. So that's a pretty aggressive projection for a guy who hasn't thrown 133 in 5 seasons, as we talked about, you know? But I don't, maybe they're going off different things, et cetera, et cetera. But like, I think the Cubs are good enough on the pitching side where we've seen like Steele jump a huge workload year over year. And I like that this signing is early enough such that they can probably get him to Arizona quick and like he'll be good by the beginning of the year. We saw with like Boris Klein's late last year where they signed late and then their entire off seasons were messed up which I think proves to some extent that, one of the issues on the injury side is like, what are guys doing in the offseason? Not saying they're not doing anything. I'm just saying, like, sometimes teams don't have overview of that, such that the guy gets into spring and then you spend 4 weeks figuring out where the guy is and ramping him in a certain way. Whereas like the guys like Steele, who stayed in the offseason in Arizona that year, he jumped 120 innings or whatever he did year over year. Like, they were on him all the time. And like, if you ask any coach on the pitching side, like what they would prefer, like that coach would just be like, I would love to be attached to that guy's hip for the entire offseason. And I guarantee we can jump his innings by 100, 120. So I like, to counter your point a little, I like the concept of like Boyd going to an org that I think has had a pretty good track record with like Julian Merriweather and some other pitchers being aggressive with workload. So like, there's a chance he gets over 130. And then I think almost no matter what happens in that case, he'll probably be worth it in this year specifically with incentives. And then next year is probably where you get into a little bit of muddier territory. But I being a little aggressive on his projections is all I'm saying, I guess, in culmination.
So Sam on Locked On yesterday said, hey, if Matthew Boyd signed with the Brewers, you'd be like, whoa, this guy is going to have a great season, because the Brewers, like, they know how to pick talent.
That's a great point.
But also, like, if, to your point, if you take the last two guys that the Cubs have done this with, where it's like, interesting signing, maybe not interesting, but like, hey, they took him to the next level. Showed Imanaga, right? He was only expected to do maybe 135 to 150 innings this year. He threw, I believe it was 173, and he dominated.
Yeah,
and that was because, and that's because guys like Hottovy and Moscas said, hey, here's exactly what you should do. And he did it. And then Jameson Taillon, you take out the first half of his first year season, and he's been literally the closest thing to a number 2 starter, and he's never been that in his career, if you ask me. So I do believe that they see something that they say, hey, here's what we did with Shota, here's what we did with JMO, and I think we can do that with you, but we have to keep you healthy. By the way, enter Tyler Zombro, right?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point.
So I think that's a potential upside as well. Now, just really quickly before we go over to Q&A, 2 things in under 30 seconds or under 50 seconds that you really like about Matthew Boyd and why people should be excited about him.
The angles it's kind of a cheap cop-out answer, but like he on the data side, we love coming up with like stuff and like combo, view, release, shape, etc. We can project the pitcher. We think this guy has great stuff. There's a point at which things like as simple as like trickle amount his walk and ERA over time become really predictive, just because we have enough sample now that shows this guy's better than maybe the components. And I really think that's what it is with Boyd. He's just a weird lefty. And I think that's a reason to be excited about him. That's my number one reason. He's weird. His angles work. I mean, it messes up hitters. And I think the changeup's really good. It's a really good pitch. Kind of has become his big pitch over his slider throughout his career progressively. He's played with the usage between them. But that's a really good pitch. Swinging strike rate's above average. It's going to generate chase. He commands it really well below the zone. I think he's a good pitcher. I think on a per inning basis, he'll be better maybe than people project him to be. It's just a matter of like where that inning total is in this individual season.
I love it. I love it, man. All right, before we get to Q&A really quickly, we got close to 300 people in this room, which I'm super excited about.
That's super cool.
Yeah, make sure to
like. I'm like getting emotional and stuff. I feel like I've
yeah, exactly. I've never seen Lance's octave on.
You got me riled up.
Yeah,
I'm coming off of sickness too, so it's a little scratchy there, which maybe helps.
Bro, you just love talking to me. That's what it's all about. So guys, make sure if you haven't already, like the video. If you haven't subscribed, make sure that you subscribe as well. And also make sure, I'm going to post this again. It was in the comments towards the top, but Lance has his own YouTube channel. If you're not already subscribed to that, it is now once again in the comments. And, as you can hear, Lance is very good at the metrics. He's very good at the I guess you would say,
the nerd stuff.
The nerd stuff, but I was gonna say the physics of baseball is a big thing for you as well. So that's something that I think if you're ever just like, man, I really want to understand why one guy is good or why one guy is upcoming, I think that's something that Lance does a really good job of. So let's go ahead and get to Q&A now, Lance. So one of the first ones that was posted, I'm not even going to try to say that name, but it's Will Birdie. I'm assuming Brandon Birdsell make his Wrigley debut in 2025. I would think yes, right?
Yeah, I think it's a smash yes. Yeah. I don't know why. Yeah. Maybe it's like a late season thing, but I think he's actually, you go from the jump, like if they run into an injury and they need a starter in April, May, he's probably above Horton. I don't exactly, we don't have updates. Like if you were to ask me right now, maybe we get a Horton health update in the next 3 months that makes us more confident it's Horton. But I think Birdsell's like the next guy up, purely from an innings total strikeout standpoint. Yeah, he's an interesting dude. He's a byproduct of the Cubs system. Cut right fastball, kind of a weird pitch off that. They played around with the slider this most recent season, split it into two pitches, which I like. He's throwing that kind of more death ball shaped curve, which is definitely going to get some fodder on our network marquee eventually when he comes up and stuff. But he's a fun arm. I don't know if he's like a top rotation guy, but that was a great pick from a pure just get a guy to be a major leaguer and eat some innings. I think he'll be that.
Love it. RWB team says, what is a package that you would give for Garrett Crochet? I'm a firm believer that we should not give up Cam Smith, Moises Ballesteros, Casey, Horton, or Wiggins.
He's going to hate my answer because I would give up a lot for Crochet. I think
I think you have to. I think you have to.
I think all those people, unfortunately, here are RWB team that you mentioned. I would be fine giving up, which is maybe insane. As the prospect guy, Casey's probably the one that I'm a little hesitant on. Just because I think the top end power there is really good. The problem with selling Horton right now is that his stock is so low, it just doesn't make sense. Wiggins is like a super high variance guy. Cam Smith is interesting. That's probably too close to his draft that you can like properly analyze him. So maybe he's the guy I'd hold. And Mo, if you could convince a team Mo's a full-time catcher, then yeah, he's gone. You know, like you trade him because that value is going to be insane. So if you want to package like a couple of those guys, like Mo Wiggins, Casey for Crochet, is that too much? What would you say to that?
Mo Wiggins, Casey, I think
extend Crochet. Let's assume you can extend Crochet. You extend him and you want to.
If you can extend him, yeah, I think so. I mean, my mind is a little bit changed on Moises Ballesteros after talking to Rachel Folden.
She sold him. I'll give her that. Yeah, it was well done.
And she admits she's not a defensive coach, but at the same time, she's a baseball person. And if you can see, if you know what a good swing looks like, you probably at some level know what a good catching position and throwing arm and all that stuff looks like. So I don't know enough about Wiggins, to be honest. I know that Greg Huss with Cubs on Deck is really big on him. And so that worries me.
Super high variance arm. Yeah, super high variance.
Casey, it's tough, man.
Casey's a tough one there. I agree.
I don't see, as long as Cam Smith is not involved, I think I'm okay with it. I really am high on Cam Smith. I really am high on Matt Shaw.
I agree.
I can be okay with Rojas, Triantos, Alcantara. I don't think that those guys, I haven't heard enough for them to just be like, wow, like those are untouchables. I think those guys are touchable. I think that's
for sure. I agree.
The only thing about Rojas, he's 19 years old and he's already in his just finished his third professional year, which is wild to think.
And I got to imagine if you're the White Sox looking at the Crochet trade, like you're probably more confident in your projection on guys that are close to the majors. Yeah. So like, I don't think the Cubs will be able to get it done with like Rojas. I don't even think they'd be able to get it done with Cam Smith. Although I agree. I want to keep Cam Smith. I just want to see what he is. Yeah. But like, you're going to have to do with like Casey, Kevin, and another guy's close. Like, I don't think the White Sox are going to take a Rojas and wait 5 years for him to be like a shortstop at 24 years old. Like, they kind of need it now, which is why I think the Orioles line up really well because they have all these guys like Heston Kjerstad, Kobe Mayo, who are like there and ready. Yeah. And like you slot them into an everyday order, and it's interesting. And I think the Cubs have that too, so they should be competitive in this market.
Why don't we just give Jerry and the White Sox Cody's contract as well?
Yeah. There we go.
There you go. All right. Next question is from Dave Backstrom. Is it bad to have three lefties in a rotation, or even four if Wicks is involved? I'm really interested to hear your answer on this. We may either strongly agree or strongly disagree. Let's hear it.
I think I'm less hesitant, I would say, than most. The main two reasons I say that. Number one, I think when you stack a strength, like you have a ton of lefties, what you run into is like more variance. In my opinion, on like an aggregate 162 game basis, because what you run into is like, you might run into a set of teams who just are not good versus left-handed pitching. And you want to point out that I think 3 of the other 4 teams in the NL Central were bottom 10 or 12, I want to say, in WRC plus last year against left-handed pitching.
Okay.
So if you want to play like the White Sox angle of just like dominate the teams in the division and then push away, even though I understand bounce schedule takes some of that advantage away, I think that could be a route to like overperforming. So I get the idea of like you want to be balanced and like protect against all odds, but I like the idea of having 3 lefties in the rotation. I like the idea of having 3 good lefties in the rotation. Steele is good. It's a very different fastball shape than Garrett Crochet, so I see no issue there. No. Shota, I think, is going to regress a bit, especially if the park plays more neutral, but I still love him. He's still an above average pitcher. So like, it's not so much to me as like, oh, I don't want to go after Crochet because it adds 3 lefties. Like, I want Crochet because he's projected to be like the second
Well,
best pitcher in baseball.
I,
You have a
I think
chance
I
to
think
get that, go get it.
this is separate from Crochet because currently there are 3 lefties in the rotation in
Oh, I'm thinking
Imanaga,
Boyd. I'm messing
Boyd.
up Boyd.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
my bad,
And
my bad,
so
my bad.
he's saying if Wicks is involved, that'd
Sorry.
be 4, and that's not even including Crochet. You include Crochet, there's potentially 5 lefties in the
I just
rotation.
assumed we were still talking
Yeah,
Crochet. That's my
yeah, I
bad.
know. Sorry.
So with when you factor in Boyd, yeah, I mean, I think it again. I'm going to stick by my point. Like I think when you add a strength, like you create more variance for yourself. You're able to get out of tougher matchups because you're playing a team that isn't great versus left-handed pitching. And I do think like Shota and Steele are really good. So I just hesitate to say it's not a great strategy to have like loaded on one side because that's just how your value broke. I don't know if you agree. I'm just
I
not totally convinced it's an issue.
I strongly believe we're past that era of baseball that the righty lefty matchup and all that stuff. It's just, to me, it's out the door. Um, you look at guys like Mark Leiter Jr., you look at guys like Hector Neris,
Sure.
and I know those are relievers, but those guys are better against lefties than righties. And I know you could say the opposite for Hayden Wisniewski and Jameson Taillon and be like, well,
Sure.
those guys are really bad against lefties. Well, yes, but I would say those are the extremes. There's the rule and then there's the exception. I think those guys are the exception. To your point, if they're good, I don't give a crap. You wouldn't say that about
really
righties. You wouldn't be like, oh my gosh, the Cubs have 4 righties in their rotation. Well, okay, maybe that's because righties are a lot more common than lefties, but also like, to me, anytime a lefty faced the Cubs this year, I was like, well, there's a loss. Like they were not good against lefties. And I think that is, to me, it's just not a thing anymore. It's not a thing like it used to be. It might be a thing, but before it was this big thing, now it's this little thing. And so
agreed,
I don't
agreed.
care.
We're on the same page.
If they're good, get them in the rotation. So I think we're kind of close on that.
Agreed.
Let's see here. Next question. Lance from Sean Hendrickson. What's up, Sean? Great friend of the show. Do you think the Cubs can be competitive, even making the postseason, if all they did was improve the bullpen and have somewhat consistency from starters that we did in 2024? So essentially just improving the bullpen, but also having the same consistency from the starters in 2024.
I do. Yeah. Partially because of the point that I was talking about. Like, if you're trying to build like a 90-win team, there's just instances you run into.
So much.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to run into instances where that exact team, based on just how random things happen over the course of 162 games, which is a lot, where the team just ends up winning 78 or 80, and you're like, wow, terrible season. 8 wins over the course of 162 games, which is whatever percent, very small percent of the entire mass of games in a given season. There's an equal chance that 90-win team somehow wins 100, Like the variance in baseball is a lot. Like what's the old saying I used to hear a lot was like everyone goes 60-60, and then like the other 42 games decide the season. Now with the White Sox being the worst team in the history of the sport, you have to change this slightly. You can't go 60 anymore because apparently you can't win 60. But that's my point. It's just like I think this team is competitive. I think a bunch of teams are competitive if they basically upgrade like a small little part that was a big issue. And especially because you can draw so much of the Cubs issues back to bullpen early in the season, that if you just like if you put Tanner Scott on that team last year, they probably win 88, 90. I don't know. And that's not a big difference from where they were, but it's enough to, I think, it's a complete change in the tenor of the season, right?
Yeah.
I think we'd be a lot more like positive. I think a lot of fans right now on the Cubs side, from my perception, I don't want to say negative, but they're just like, come on, and I totally get that vibe. Like, I totally understand that. It's just like, I think sometimes it's good to zoom out and be like 4 wins over the course of 162 games would like completely change the tenor of where our thoughts are now. And you could argue those 4 games are completely random. So to answer the question, yeah, you can be competitive if you do basically nothing, which is what he's saying, right? You just add like Jordan Romano and Kyle Finnegan as your pen guys and be like, here you go, new pen. We're rolling it back. Porter Hodge is the closer from the jump. We need to backfill Romano. We can do it. This team probably has a really good chance to win like 85 to 90 games. And I probably get in the playoffs.
So this is not a question from everyone else, but it is a question from me because of what you just said. You just mentioned 4 wins could incredibly change the outcome for a team. Well, to me, 4 wins is, if you look back on May and June, easily 4 wins could have been taken from that. Call it even 6 to 8 wins during that time. I asked Boog, do you believe that the Cubs had a lack of urgency? And he lost, we're good friends. He lost his mind. He lost his mind about it, right? He's like, there's no such thing. You don't know when they're urgent. But based on what you just said, right? Like 4 wins, if you just make some changes when it just doesn't feel like the thing is working. And I get the numbers. I get that, there's a process of, hey, so-and-so is the guy that over the course of his career is the guy to put in that situation. But if it's just not working at that time, does it not make sense to act with some urgency of, hey, it's time to put this guy either on the bench or maybe give him some more bullpens and try to work on the side while he figures it out. And here's the guy during this 30-day period that we think is going to give us the most likelihood for success. And that act of what they're doing is based on urgency. So I guess my question is, do you agree that there's no such thing as a sense of urgency in baseball?
I think I totally understand where Boog's coming from, because he's thinking of it from like the very front office angle perspective. I call it, and people hate when I say this, but I say it because it's true, and everyone listening knows it's true. I call it like the venture capital strategy, right? Where you're just like, you're making very process driven decisions, such that there's no room for emotion. Like you would ask these same people. I'd be curious to see whether Boog thinks momentum exists in sports, because this is like the most fascinating
I don't
discussion.
think he believes in it based on what he said.
I don't think a lot of people do, but there's a difference. I think I'm indifferent. I'll play sports for like, I have no idea whether it exists. I play sports and I emotionally get involved in them, and I understand. I feel it. You like feel momentum, but like there's a difference between like acknowledging it exists and then acting on it in a way that could alter the path of a team. I think because of how much information is taken over the sport, what happens a lot of the time is you don't get that. What you get instead is like, we will just stick to process, because then we can recap and reflect on our decisions much easier than if it was, we give like human element autonomy to managers to pull pitchers in given instances, which is something I've always wanted tracked, because I bet you'd be able to find a manager or two over a long period of time who would be able to like emotionally tell when a pitcher can lock in for a given spot versus take him out. Like I refuse to believe that there aren't people in this world who would be able to like swing these moments and have a slight edge in being able to make better decisions perhaps than numbers do, which maybe is like the hottest thing I've ever had, because I'm literally the numbers guy.
Because you're the numbers guy. Yeah, exactly.
But the problem is, like, I think that everyone thinks that they should bring those emotions into the game and make small adjustments and see if the outcomes are better. And in those instances, I really hesitate. It's like, I believe those people exist. As to whether you can actually ID the person and then give them the autonomy to make the decision, that is the problem. That's the really hard thing to do, So for the most part, I understand where Boog's coming from, where it's just like, I don't know in that spot what Alzolay is thinking, for example, or why you don't call up Porter Hodge earlier. And like, I don't see any reason why 3 months would have made a difference on like what Hodge was at the major league level, but it's like, it's different to actually then make that call and have like no process behind it when you're such a model driven process org. That's the biggest thing. Like, you have to measure things to improve them. And like, you get into this really ethereal area where it's like, we have all this information and numbers and we're very process driven, but like in this spot, nope, we're going gut here. Like, that's, I think, a really hard thing for the average fan, I would say, to wrap their head around from like a decision-making on-field standpoint. It's like, it's just much easier to tie yourself to like the pure number side.
I just kind of think of it like blackjack, where it's like, okay,
spot on.
Like
you can run hot for 2 days, but you didn't all of a sudden solve blackjack. The odds are still what the odds are.
Exactly. And so, but like, even when I'm not a blackjack expert, so I'm not saying that I'm right, but there are times when you're like, okay, the process would tell me not to hit on 6 because the dealer's also showing, or on 16 because the dealer's also showing 6.
Yeah.
But also, I've been seeing a lot of face cards out there. So for me, like, the likelihood that dealer has 16 and is going to bust feels a lot less. And that's what I kind of feel like when it comes down to in May and June, the Cubs were showing 16 and the dealer was showing 6, but there were a lot of face cards before that showing that dealer's not actually going to have 16. They're probably going to have like 11 or 12, and then they're going to hit that face card, or they're going to hit that 9 and get 20 or 21. And we just kept on being like, no, forget that we are seeing all these face cards. Just forget that we're seeing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
I don't
like
know
the
if
new
that's a
info. It's
good.
like card counting, right? It's like you
Yeah,
count
I
cards,
don't.
you
I don't know
get
if
like
that's.
these slight edges. It's like
Yeah, I don't know if that's a good comparison, but it feels good in the way that I'm explaining
no,
it.
I think it does because like go to roulette, right, where it's just purely
Yeah,
random in any given roll. It's like you see
yeah.
7 reds in a row. What are you betting your next? The reality is that
Doesn't matter.
prior
Yeah,
reds should not have any influence, but
yeah,
it does for a lot of people, and I understand that. I get it. Like to completely like throw away that emotional side, I think defeats the
yeah.
purpose of the sport. We're just playing with robots otherwise.
I think so too. All right, I know we're past the 45-minute mark. I'm having some fun. I know we've got a few other questions here. Are you good on
Yeah, I
time,
mean,
or
one
do you
quick.
need
Yeah,
to?
let's do it. Rapid fire.
Okay,
I'll keep the. I feel like I'm going on tangents. I'm sorry.
you're good. You're good. All right, Tom Cotter, also a good friend of the show, says, "How do you see Council integrating our top minor league leaguers into the major league roster? Will we, in your opinion, get to see Casey in 2025? Do you think that Mobile or Moises Ballesteros will get his shot as well?"
I think we're going to run into what we've run into the last couple of years where the minor leaguers aren't getting as much play as they should. Partially because the guy who got a lot of that play was PCA, who had defensive value. And that buoyed anything he was doing offensively from a struggle standpoint, which allowed him to correct and then be the guy he is, who's a stud. I think it's going to be tougher to do that with like Casey and Mo, where it's like, I don't think they're, my impression right now is that they're not going to pencil in Mo for 80 games behind the plate in 2025. My impression is they're not going to pencil Casey in right field in for 100 games. So it's a matter of like, what is the tolerance level for struggle out of the gate? Because we've seen so many guys last year run into issues with the bat. Like that's the big thing. Is like, are you confident in the rest of your roster such that you can accept a below average performance to get KC locked in over a 2-month period, such that you get him in August and September raking? That's like that's the hardest question I think to answer. Perhaps the
Yes.
Talkman non-tender had some influence on this, where I was like,
Mm,
I thought he would stay because
I thought he
the
would
OBP
too.
so high, very
Yeah.
defined role, etc. Maybe this means they're more confident in Casey, but Casey probably will still run like a 35% strikeout rate for the first 100 ABs of his career. I'd be shocked if it's lower than that. It's just the pitching's got so good at the major league level. So yes, I think we'll see Mo and we'll see Casey. It's just I don't think we're going to see them in troves like take over the team and be great off the bat.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of like the defining year for Council is going to be this year, like figuring out how to intertwine that in where you can get these guys locked. Because like I think that Mo and Casey have incredible potential, but I think the only way they're going to get better is to play at the major league level, and that's going to be hard to do when this team's trying to win 88 to 90 games or whatever to win the division.
Not that my opinion matters, but I think I would much rather see Moises Ballesteros get 50 to 70 starts than Matt Thaiss. And I
Yeah,
would
Thice feels like
also,
depth to me. Yeah,
yeah, it does. And then I also think based on the health of your outfielders, Hap has been really healthy the last couple of years, but Bellinger and Suzuki have both had 1 month injuries at a time each of the last couple of years. So I think Casey at least gets a runway because of some injuries. Whether he takes advantage of that or not is to be seen.
yep.
Kyle Lawson, just a scenario. The front office is planning on adding a power bat and a closer. Realistically, who makes the most sense to you? We could probably have an entire episode on this, but does anyone come to mind?
Well, Tanner Scott. I mean, if you're talking money agnostic here, I think that Holmes and Hoffman are getting their most interest through starters, like a starter conversion, which I made a video about, which you can check on my YouTube channel on. Um, so maybe the dollar value just changes there. They want more longevity, and they just push a lot of teams out of the market that like want them as relievers. So I think Scott makes a ton of sense. If you're not going to go the Scott route, which I don't think they're going to because the dollars attached to that, I think a lot of these smart pitching development teams just don't want to dish out 50 million a year for a closer to some extent. I think what you do is like go after a couple lower guys, like as I mentioned, Romano, Kyle Finnegan, maybe like a Jose Leclerc, and you go after like 2 to 3, and you hope one of them pops. You know, you have a good track record making these guys a little better. On the power bat side, I don't entirely know. Like, I don't really feel
I don't
like
know
that's a
where.
free agent angle, right?
No.
Like, I think that's a trade piece, and in that trade, it's really hard to ID who it would be because you're probably trading a major league piece that would open up a spot for them. So
You
I guess
have to.
it's third base.
Yeah.
Would it just be a third baseman? Like if you want to really push on a free agent, I mean, Bregman doesn't make a lot of sense, but he's like, would he fit on this
Where
team? I guess. I
I
don't
don't
know.
think the
Like,
money is there anymore.
I agree. And like Paredes is there. So like again, I'm thinking like, okay, trade Paredes, trade Horner,
Yeah.
Shaw second, someone at third, and then that third spot's open, and you can put whoever you want there at that point, you know, from the power standpoint. But I don't know. I don't know who the power bat is. This is a great question, man.
If we had the answer to that, we would probably have 100,000 subscribers, because then by February it comes to fruition. But you got time for 2 more questions?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. Kim Jong-un, of course, honestly, will the Cubs make a move? That will really help them get into the postseason. And I think, just to dig in deeper, your quote that you had the other day on Marquee was they have to make a move. I don't see them not.
I'll be stunned if there's not a trade.
Yeah. And
so I'm gonna stick with that.
Yeah. And so on the other side is Sharma is like, I don't know if they're going to. And so I don't know. I mean, let's put it in this perspective. How big would that trade be? Are we getting a star? Are we getting a mid-tier guy? Are we just getting a major leaguer to open up some salary? Like, what kind of move is that going to be?
I think it's got to be like an impact guy, like, or maybe it's impact through starting, and then that opens up Shaw at second. But it's like, I do think like the value on Horner right now is so ambiguous to me because of the injury stuff that I just don't know what you're getting for him. So maybe it's all prospects for some major league starting pitcher, which again, I guess it lines up with the Mariners, but like the prices on those guys are insane. I just think Crochet makes a little more sense because of the history of that training with that organization and such. So I guess to answer the question, will they make a move that really helps them? I'm gonna go yes. Like, you got to stay positive here. Like, this is the time where anything can be true. You know, like I think there's no reason. I think my angle would be, from an emotional standpoint, it's better to like hope that something cool is going to happen, and then maybe it does. Then like just mope and assume it's not for 2 months. Like, if in 2 months nothing has happened, then it's tough time to mope. But it's not time to mope right now. Like, I'm all in. Give me Crochet. You gotta make a move. Like, I've said this multiple times. I'll be stunned if there's not a trade. Sahadev is like, I think, one of the best reporters on the beat right now. So I totally understand what he's saying. But I will also point out that like the Cubs are notoriously tight with all information. And like you saw last year when like Nightingale had that scoop on trying to trade Morel or whatever, like Jed came out publicly, said like that was absurd or whatever. And then they traded him like 5 months later. Like, come on, you know what I mean? Like, he clearly got great info there. So I don't know. They're just notoriously tight. There could be something weird here where it's like, oh, you look over and it's like, oh, look at Jesus Lazard is now on the team. And it's like, has anybody said that name in a while? Like, that was a big name at the deadline. Cubs were matched up with him. Where's that rumor gone? I get that's a new brass in Miami, but like a name like that, where it's like, oh, they were linked to him in the past, boom, out of nowhere, it's back. And there it is. That trade's executed. That's
what I'm about to say is either going to give a lot of peace to Cubs fans, or it's going to piss off a lot of Cubs fans. And I just think that as a society, we want everything done now. And so it's December and we've had free agency open for a month. And why the hell don't we have our entire 26-man roster set?
Yeah, it's fair. It's fair.
And it's just not going to happen. I mean, we're going to have our 26-man roster set one day before the start of the season going into Japan. That's the way it is. So show some patience and let's just hope. I still believe to my depth that Jed has something to prove this season for Tom to say, yes, we're re-signing you. And for that reason, he's got to do something. All right. Let's end with a fun question for you, Lance. It's from Patrick. Lance, if you had one pitch to pitch for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Splitter. Easy. Because there's a bunch of guys who throw splitters like 70% of the time and can't do pretty much anything else and have major league careers. So.
Now, what if that question was asked you, call it more than a year ago?
I'd still it's probably still made a bit of sweeper back then, I guess. I don't know. I don't know if I'm gonna do but I got a chance to throw off the regular field mound. I posted on my Instagram.
I saw that.
My body tightened up. Something happens when I'm 29, but my God, I hadn't thrown in like 3 or 4 years, and it's like my entire everything is flying up. I'm lagging so hard. I showed it to someone in Oregon. They were like, my God, that is a mess. And I was like, I know, it sucks, man. Don't get old.
Meanwhile, that would look like me on a good day. So good for you. All right, guys. Once again, Lance is going to be out at the winter meetings next week. We're going to go live with him there. A lot more probably about reporting than and we'll still be able to do some Q&A there. But this was fun. We went way over 45 minutes, but I hope you guys had fun. I hope you got your questions answered. If you did post a comment with a question you didn't get answered, apologies. We're going to go ahead and try to get to yours next time. But Lance, appreciate you, brother. This was fun.
Good talking, dude. We'll see you around.
All right. We'll see you guys.